Okay, so we've got a major development in the ongoing disputed election in the U.S. Mitch McConnell has officially recognized Joe Biden as the president-elect. Now, what this means is that on January 6th, when the joint session of Congress meets to count, the votes for the Electoral College and certify the results, the U.S. Senate is not going to vote to deny the certification of enough states to deny Biden 270 electoral votes. If Mitch McConnell intended to do this, he would not be recognizing Joe Biden already. My guess is what we will see on January 6th is that you will probably see another senator, Rand Paul or Ron Johnson are the two names I've been seeing, object, along with Mo Brooks and perhaps other members of the House, to the results in multiple states. There will be the 2-hour debate in the House and Senate. The House will definitely vote not to, not to dispute the results, and the Senate now will not either. If Mitch McConnell is not on board with it, it's not going to happen. It's as simple as that. The only way it would have happened anyway is if somehow he was able to whip Mitt Romney, Ben Sasse, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, those types into voting to decertify the results. And so, as I've talked about, the only real avenue left for Trump at this point to block a Biden win is if his right-hand man, Mike Pence, steps into the breach and throws out these states or says, hey, I've got competing slates of electors here. I can't very well pick one or the other. But considering now that Mitch McConnell is recognizing Biden as the president-elect, I doubt that someone like Pence would take the other side of that. I don't think that Mike Pence and Mitch McConnell would be on different pages as far as this is concerned. If Mitch McConnell had not recognized Joe Biden as the president-elect and McConnell instead said, we have to wait till January 6th to see how this turns out, then I would have said, wow, there's a good chance that the Republicans in Congress are going to try something on January 6th, and Pence might just yet come out and intervene. But based on McConnell's words, I would think that's a no. So yes, there are ongoing legal disputes still going on in these various states that set alternate slates of electors. The Trump campaign is challenging the results in many states. And I think that they make decent cases in quite a few of these states. But as we've seen, even when they make great cases, that the results of the election are in dispute and can be called into question by certain irregularities, violations of state law, the judges still don't take their side. Like in Arizona or Nevada, when they found 40,000 double voters, the court said, "Wow, you're right, 40,000 double voters. That would throw the results of this election into dispute." But you have to go and get an affidavit from every single one of these people who voted twice, who you have documented as voting twice. Having the evidence isn't good enough. So when they have, affidavits, they say, well, this isn't good enough. You need hard evidence. When you have the hard evidence, they say, no, you need affidavits. It's it's a ridiculous standard that obviously the judge is setting them up to fail because they know you can't produce that quickly. You can't go and depose 40,000 people. Same is true now in Wisconsin. They sued over indefinite confinement. That was something like about 120,000 people or something, way more than the margin of victory. And the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, yeah, that's totally not okay. You can't do that. But you have to go and depose all these people who voted, by indefinite confinement. Vast majority of which probably did not qualify as indefinitely confined. You have to get them to admit that. And sign a sworn affidavit saying that they broke the law. Then, we'll agree to say that to dispute the results of the election. Okay, so you can have the evidence, you can win your case, and you still lose. You'll be given no remedy. And since McConnell is saying this, no judge is going to, the judges are all going to look at what McConnell said and say, well, I guess that's what we're going to do. Even if the Trump people come out and like I said, in these two cases, in Wisconsin and Nevada, they won, as far as I'm concerned, in the courts. The court chose not to grant them any remedy. As far as I'm concerned, if you have enough irregularities to throw the results of the election in dispute, the whole election should be thrown out. Either you have a revote or that state does not get to cast any electoral votes if they did not carry out their election properly, in line with the electors clause, i.e. in line with the statute as written by the state legislature. That would be the fair and just thing to do under the law. But luckily, people in this country are starting to realize that we do not have a fair and just judicial system. It's been unfair and unjust for a very long time, and I wouldn't have expected that Donald Trump trying to challenge the results of an election would be what would wake people up to that. You would think it would be much more sinister things like innocent people going to death row and then being exonerated 30 years later. You would think maybe that would wake some people up to how the judicial system railroads people into certain directions. But hey, I'll take what I can get. And if this McConnell thing wasn't enough, the Supreme Court last Friday saying that they are not going to take up the Texas case because they have no standing. I mean, that to me was enough of it, sent a strong enough signal to the rest of the judiciary that, hey, drop this election like a hot potato. Do not grant any remedy to anything. In this case, don't even hear the case. What I'm discussing are not, in Nevada and in Wisconsin, these are not states where Trump, I think, made a good case or had a good case to bring, but was denied standing, was just dismissed outright. These cases were actually heard. There's plenty of other places where they had better cases, but just weren't heard by the court. And just to clarify for YouTube, I'm not saying that that what I'm discussing would have changed the results of the election overall. No. I'm not saying that voter fraud cheated Trump out of the election. I'm not saying anything about fraud at all. I'm talking about irregularities, breaches of statute, and I'm not saying that it would change anything, because obviously Nevada and Wisconsin, those are not enough to deny Biden 270. No, I don't mean that at all. So I think at this point I do not see any avenue by which Trump can hang on. But does that mean that this whole situation is over and that we just, we go on with our lives and have Biden for the president of the next, 4 years, probably less than 4 years? No, because half the country has zero confidence in the results of this election, and Trump should not let that go, nor do I think he will let it go. Trump will keep this issue alive. The court cases will continue. They will amass their evidence, and I think that they're going to continue to prosecute this case in the court of public opinion, as they very well should, because anything, in my mind, that erodes confidence in Washington, D.C. is a good thing. That is the goal. Washington needs to lose power. Because now I have total confidence. If you have President Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, let's say, try and, whether through executive order or through actual legislation, introduce some big gun control thing, like adding semi-auto rifles to the NFA list, that would be totally unenforceable. I think it would have been anyway, even if, let's say, that happened under the Obama administration. I think that would have been unenforceable. But at this point, it definitely is, because people are fed up with the feds. If half the country thinks that the president is illegitimate, and then the president says, "Oh, by the way, I'm coming to take your guns," that's a pivot point in American history, or a breaking point. Let's put it that way. And God willing, that would not lead to any kind of civil war, because that's not an outcome that anyone should hope for. You don't want to get to the point where people actually have to defend their Second Amendment right individually, as individual citizens, because that is a horrible, horrible thing. Again, as I've said, tens of thousands of Waco sieges all over the country, Ruby Ridge situations, actually. Ruby Ridge is the better comparison. Individual guys in their house, ATF comes to take their guns or to make them pay the tax, and they say no. And that's going to happen. So the result that we do want as an alternative to that is discussed in Hans Hermann Hoppe's brilliant talk from 1998, I believe, called What Must Be Done. It's very famous. You can either read it or listen to the audio. And it is Hoppe's formula for a bottom-up revolution through taking over your local government. The defense against a tyrannical centralized government is a local government that is on your side and will stand up against them. We're seeing this now on a small scale in the town of Mossy Rock, Wisconsin. This is very similar to what Hoppe discussed back in 1998, to where you have a local community who just collectively say, we do not comply with the centralized government anymore. We're not going to follow their rules. In the case of Mossy Rock, did I say Wisconsin or Washington? It's in the Washington state. In the case of Mossy Rock, they are it's a town rebelling against the authority of the governor and the state capital. But if you have a federal issue, it would most likely be the state governments rebelling against the authority of the federal government. Although in a lot of cases in blue states, you'll have, hopefully, county sheriffs that will rebel against it as well. And not rebel through violence, rebel through noncompliance. Simply say to people, we will not do as you tell us. A peaceful act of disassociation, civil disobedience. That's basically all I'm talking about. Civil disobedience is a very powerful thing because it looks very bad if you have this big evil empire trying to impose its will on peaceful people, and they just start gunning them down. Because when people see that, they don't think that they want to comply. They think, oh gee, I better resist while I still can, or else, I'm going to be a slave for the rest of my life. And this, I listened to an interview, I don't know if I mentioned this yesterday, I listened to an interview with Alan West, who put out that initial statement on Friday, as the Republican, the chairman of the Texas Republican Party, essentially implying that he wanted to secede and form a union of constitutional states. It's very similar language to what the Confederates used. When the Confederates seceded, they were not saying, hey, we hate this American system and the American Constitution. They were saying, no, we're defending the American Revolution. The northern states are the ones that have strayed from, the real America. That's a very common trope in American history. Everybody thinks that they're the real Americans. And the Confederates said the same thing. They said, hey, we want to abide by the Constitution. And if you look at the Confederate Constitution, it's almost the same as the U.S. Constitution. There's a couple differences. I think 6-year presidential terms, single term, term limited, which was a good addition, adding term limits. The U.S. had no term limits at the time. Line item vetoes. That's a good thing in my mind. What was the... Oh, and slavery. I think you had to be a slave state to join. It was like some kind of constitutional right, some BS. So, of course, they threw in their pet issue, which was slavery. But if you listen to their propaganda and stuff, they said, well, we just want to stick by the Constitution. That's how it was sold to the Southern people. They said, hey, this is... Lincoln is trying to end the American experiment. We have to stand up for our constitutional rights. And so what Alan West said is very similar to that. And so in this interview, he tried to walk back the whole secession thing, and he said, what do you mean? Why should we secede? We're the ones who like the Constitution. Glenn Beck, said the same thing. And he said, all I'm saying is that if the federal government, after having this, illegitimate president comes in and starts trying to lay down unconstitutional rules, it's the right of every American to resist that. They do not have to comply with these unconstitutional rules, specifically referring to guns. Because let's be honest, that's the big wedge issue in this country. If there's going to be any, if it wasn't for the gun issue, honestly, I don't think there would be much need for the states to disassociate from one another. There are cultural differences, yes, but there's fewer there's scarcely other cultural issues that are as directly threatened by the government than guns. And so to me, the best thing that can happen at this point is Trump never concedes. He continues in his crusade, which to me at this point looks like he's ultimately going to fail, which is going to be fine. It'll be a Pyrrhic victory for Biden and his folks. Because like I said, if nobody believes you won, you didn't really win. What matters is, if the right doesn't feel defeated, then you're not a winner. And so Trump should continue, speaking out publicly. He needs to be in the public eye. He needs to keep prodding people on Twitter, just like he has been this 4 years. I mean, that's been the best part of the Trump presidency, has been Trump's Twitter. He needs to continue doing that. And when the moment is right, when, let's say, again, hopefully this comes sooner rather than later, Biden or Harris comes out and says, hey, we're going to just start, we're going to issue major gun regulation, adding semi-autos to the NFA, which means everyone has to register their guns and pay a $200 tax stamp, something that is a non-negotiable. Trump is going to come out and say, this is nuts. Fake President Biden is trying to take away your guns. Resist. And that'll be the call put out. And you're going to have all these states, Texas, your deep South states, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, I'm sure. A bunch of states are going to say, we're not enforcing this gun law thing. That's unconstitutional, ridiculous. And then things are going to get very exciting. And hopefully nothing gets violent. The hope there is that the federal government realizes it's powerless, and we get into a prolonged war of words. Because the federal government, it is an abstraction. If people just refuse to recognize that it's there, it's not there anymore. It's that simple. So I'm in no way disappointed or feeling defeated, and I don't think any of you should. Even if you were Trump supporters, which, I wasn't a big Trump guy, but I preferred him. I thought there were decent reasons why, things could have been better had he won this time around. And that, of course, was that I hoped that the left would try secession. But in lieu of that, I'd rather see the right secede anyway. And if you're someone who supported Trump all along, the reasons that you supported him, in my mind, the reason why most people supported him was to try and, defend certain values of this country, to stand up against certain bad people. And that fight is not lost, not by a long shot. If that's the fight that you're interested in tearing down the elite or preserving our rights, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see folks back here tomorrow.